I was 28 years old when I moved in with my girlfriend, Jessica. We had been dating for a year, and everything seemed perfect. She was beautiful, smart, and we shared so many interests. Our apartment in Seattle was small but cozy, and I was excited to build a future together. I worked as a software engineer while she had a marketing job. But things changed when she suddenly refused to pay rent this month, yet expected me to fund her $5,000 Miami trip. Before I tell you about the biggest shock of my life, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you will not miss the valuable relationship lessons I paid dearly to learn. 2 years ago, I met Jessica at a company mixer downtown. Our firms shared the same office building, and someone had the bright idea to host a networking event. I was not planning to stay long that evening since social gatherings were not really my thing, but everything changed when I spotted her across the room. Jessica stood out immediately, with her confident smile and infectious laugh. She wore a simple black dress that looked stunning on her, and the way she commanded attention without trying made me curious. After gathering my courage for 20 minutes, I finally approached her at the bar. I awkwardly introduced myself as Barry from the fourth floor tech company. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely interested in talking to me. Our conversation flowed naturally, as we discovered mutual interests in hiking true crime podcasts and obscure indie bands. We exchanged numbers before the night ended, and I could barely sleep that night thinking about her. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. I remember feeling nervous until Jessica showed up, wearing jeans and a casual top, immediately putting me at ease. She had this way of making everything feel comfortable and exciting at the same time. We talked for hours, and I learned she grew up in California, but moved to Seattle for college and stayed for work. Her family still lived in San Diego, while mine was scattered across the Midwest. Those first 6 months were magical. Every weekend brought a new adventure, whether hiking through lush trails at Discovery Park or exploring tiny bookstores downtown. We would often pack picnics and spend Sunday afternoons by Lake Washington talking about our dreams and plans. Jessica loved the outdoors just as much as I did, and we made a bucket list of national parks to visit together. After a year of dating, we took the next step. My lease was ending, and Jessica suggested we find a place together. The idea thrilled and terrified me simultaneously, but it made financial sense. Seattle rent was not cheap, and combining our incomes would allow us to afford something nicer than either of us could alone. We found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with large windows and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. The move went smoothly, and we quickly settled into domestic life. We agreed to split all expenses equally: rent, utilities, groceries. Everything would be shared 50-50. Jessica was organized and suggested we create a joint account for household expenses while maintaining our separate personal accounts. It seemed like a mature, responsible arrangement, and I was impressed by her financial savvy. Those first few months of living together were wonderful. Jessica would often surprise me with home-cooked meals when I worked late. We established little traditions like Thursday movie nights and Saturday morning coffee on our balcony. She always paid her share of expenses on time, sometimes even reminding me when I forgot. Everything seemed perfect. Then, small changes began appearing. Jessica started complaining about her job, saying her boss undervalued her and her coworkers were difficult. I supported her through these frustrations, reassuring her that she was talented and would find better opportunities. Around this same time, I noticed her shopping habits changing. She began bringing home designer purses, expensive shoes, and clothing from boutiques I knew were well outside our usual budget. When I gently asked about these purchases, she explained they were investments in her professional image and necessary for career advancement. It made sense in theory, though the frequency and cost still concerned me. I trusted her judgment and wanted to be supportive, so I kept my worries to myself. 6 months into living together, the first real warning sign appeared. Rent was due, and Jessica had not transferred her portion to our joint account. When I reminded her, she seemed genuinely surprised, claiming she had forgotten completely. She promised to transfer the money the next day, but added casually that things were tight this month and asked if I could cover a bit more until her next paycheck. Wanting to be a supportive partner, I agreed without hesitation. The next month, the same thing happened, but this time she explained that she was expecting a raise soon and things would improve. I believed her and covered her portion again, dipping into my savings to make it work. All the while, I noticed she continued shopping and going out to expensive restaurants with her friends. Her Instagram showed brunches at upscale places and cocktails at rooftop bars, which confused me given her supposed financial struggles. I tried having a conversation about our finances one evening after dinner. I kept my tone neutral and expressed concern rather than accusation. Jessica became defensive, immediately insisting I was overreacting and that she had everything under control. She promised to be more consistent with expenses and said her raise would come through any day now. I wanted to believe her, so I let the matter drop, though an uneasy feeling lingered in my stomach. As weeks passed, I found myself increasingly anxious whenever bills came due. Jessica continued to be inconsistent with her contributions while maintaining her lavish social life. Her friend group consisted mainly of women from wealthy families or with high-paying jobs, and I suspected she felt pressure to keep up with their lifestyle. Still, we had an agreement, and her behavior was putting strain on both our finances and relationship. One evening, while looking for a receipt in our shared desk drawer, I found a letter from her company congratulating her on her promotion and raise dated 3 months earlier. I felt a wave of confusion, then betrayal wash over me. She had been lying about her financial situation while I struggled to cover our expenses. That night, as I lay awake beside her, I realized our relationship had fundamental problems I had been ignoring. The tension in our apartment grew palpable over the next few weeks. Jessica continued to delay or entirely skip her financial contributions, always with a new excuse ready. Sometimes it was unexpected expenses, other times family emergencies that I never saw evidence of. Meanwhile, I watched our joint account dwindle as I covered more than my fair share month after month. What bothered me most was not just the money, but the dishonesty. She had actively concealed her raise while watching me stress about making ends meet. When I finally confronted her about finding the promotion letter, she burst into tears, claiming she had been saving for a surprise vacation for us. But her shopping bags and restaurant check-ins told a different story. Our conversations about money grew increasingly tense. What started as calm discussions evolved into heated arguments that would end with Jessica either crying or storming out. She began accusing me of being controlling and obsessed with money. When I pointed out specific examples of her overspending, she would deflect by bringing up unrelated issues in our relationship or criticizing my own spending habits, though mine were far more modest. One particularly difficult evening, Jessica returned home with a new designer watch that I knew cost well over $1,000. When I questioned how she could afford such a luxury while claiming inability to pay rent, she snapped that I was not her parent and had no right to monitor her purchases. The conversation devolved quickly with Jessica, eventually shouting that I was trying to control her life and restrict her freedom. That night she slept on the couch, and I lay awake wondering how our once loving relationship had deteriorated so dramatically. I began to notice other concerning behaviors I had previously overlooked. Jessica would frequently return home much later than she said she would, offering vague explanations about work events or friend emergencies. She became protective of her phone, changing her password and angling the screen away from me when texting. My trust was eroding rapidly, and with it my feelings for her began to change. The woman I had fallen in love with seemed increasingly like a stranger, someone who viewed me more as a financial resource than a partner. I started wondering if I had been naive from the beginning, missing red flags that should have been obvious. I reached out to my best friend Michael for advice. We had been close since college, and he had always been straight with me, even when the truth hurt. After listening to my situation, he asked bluntly if Jessica had ever shown these tendencies before we moved in together. Looking back honestly, I recalled small moments where her behavior around money seemed odd or entitled, but nothing so blatant that it raised alarms. Michael suggested I set clear boundaries and consider whether this relationship was truly healthy for me. His words stayed with me, though I still hesitated to take decisive action. Despite everything, I cared deeply for Jessica and kept hoping the person I fell in love with would return if we could just work through this rough patch. The situation with our families complicated matters further. When I confided in my parents about our financial struggles, they expressed concern and suggested I protect myself legally if we had any joint assets. They had always been practical people who valued financial responsibility, and though they liked Jessica, they worried she was taking advantage of me. Jessica, meanwhile, had apparently been telling her family a very different story. According to her mother, who called me one afternoon, I was fortunate to have Jessica in my life and should be more generous with my successful tech career. It became clear that Jessica had portrayed me as much wealthier than I actually was, and herself as the reasonable partner dealing with my supposed stinginess. The complete reversal of reality left me speechless. As weeks passed, Jessica contributed less and less to our shared expenses while her personal spending seemed to increase. She began suggesting expensive weekend trips and talking about upgrading our furniture, seemingly oblivious to the fact that I was already stretching my finances thin just covering basics. When I would remind her of unpaid bills, she would promise to transfer money soon, but it rarely materialized. I started documenting our financial arrangements and her failure to meet them, saving text messages where she acknowledged debts and promised repayment. Some part of me recognized the relationship was likely ending, and I wanted to protect myself. Still, I held out hope that an honest conversation might turn things around, that Jessica might recognize the damage her behavior was causing. That illusion shattered completely on a rainy Tuesday evening when Jessica bounced into our apartment with unusual excitement. She announced she had amazing news and proceeded to explain that her friend group had organized a girls' trip to Miami. They would be staying at a 5-star beachfront resort, chartering a private yacht for a day, and enjoying VIP access to exclusive clubs. Her eyes sparkled as she described the luxury awaiting them. My stomach sank as I listened, already anticipating what would come next. Sure enough, Jessica concluded by saying the trip would cost around $5,000 per person, and since she was a bit short this month, she was hoping I could cover her portion. She said it so casually, as if requesting lunch money rather than a sum that exceeded my monthly take-home pay. I took a deep breath and calmly explained that I could not afford to fund such an extravagant trip, especially when she had not been contributing to our basic living expenses. Jessica's excitement vanished, instantly replaced by cold anger. She accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming that if I truly loved her, I would want her to enjoy this experience with her friends. The argument escalated quickly. In her frustration, Jessica finally revealed her true perspective, one that shocked me to my core. She believed that as the man in the relationship, I had an obligation to provide financially, regardless of our previous agreements about equality. According to her, my role was to ensure she could maintain the lifestyle she desired while her money remained hers alone to spend as she wished. I was speechless. This fundamentally contradicted everything we had discussed when moving in together and the values I thought we shared. When I pointed this out, Jessica dismissed our earlier agreements as naive and impractical. She admitted that several of her friends had similar arrangements with their boyfriends and seemed genuinely confused by my resistance. That night, our argument continued for hours, revealing a gulf between our values that I had never fully appreciated. Jessica eventually stormed out to stay with a friend, leaving me alone to process what had happened. I felt foolish and used wondering how I had missed such fundamental incompatibility. The next morning, I received an alert from my credit card company about suspicious activity. Someone had charged 2 first-class plane tickets to Miami on my card, totaling nearly $3,000. With a sinking feeling, I realized immediately what had happened. Jessica had taken my credit card information and booked her trip anyway, without my knowledge or consent. When I called to confront her, Jessica showed no remorse. She justified her actions by saying I was being unreasonable and that she knew I would eventually agree anyway. The casual way she admitted to essentially stealing from me revealed a person I no longer recognized or wanted in my life. This crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. As if this betrayal was not enough, Jessica escalated the situation further. She called her mother in tears, telling a fabricated story about how I had promised to fund the trip, and then cruelly changed my mind at the last minute. She claimed I was financially abusive and controlling, painting herself as the victim in a situation she had created. Her mother called me immediately, threatening legal action and spreading her daughter's false narrative. She claimed Jessica had witnesses to my promises and texts proving my financial obligations. I knew these were lies, but the audacity still stunned me. This was the moment I finally accepted the relationship was beyond saving. That evening, Michael came over with takeout food and a sympathetic ear. As we sat in my living room surrounded by the life Jessica and I had built together, I poured out everything, including the credit card theft and false accusations. Michael listened quietly, then asked a simple question that changed everything. "Barry, if your sister told you her boyfriend was treating her this way, what would you tell her to do?" The answer was immediately clear. I would tell her to leave to protect herself from someone who had demonstrated such disrespect and dishonesty. The realization hit me with surprising force, as if I had been underwater and finally came up for air. I needed to end this relationship, completely and immediately. The next morning, I called my credit card company to dispute the charges and request a new card. I documented everything from our original financial agreement to the unauthorized charges and false accusations. I changed passwords on all my accounts and began researching my rights regarding the apartment lease. When Jessica returned 2 days later, her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the anger, replaced by tearful apologies and promises to change. She claimed to realize her mistake and wanted another chance. Had this happened earlier, I might have wavered, but seeing this dramatic shift only confirmed my decision. This was manipulation, not genuine remorse. I calmly explained that our relationship was over and she needed to find somewhere else to live within the next week. I had already spoken with our landlord, who agreed to remove her from the lease given the circumstances. I offered to help her find a new place within her budget, but made it clear that our romantic relationship and living arrangement were finished. Jessica cycled through emotions rapidly as the reality set in. First came more tears and pleading, then anger and accusations, and finally threats. She claimed I could not legally force her out, that she would make me regret this decision, that she would tell everyone I was abusive. I remained calm through it all, having anticipated these reactions based on her past behavior. "I have documented everything, Jessica," I told her firmly. "The unauthorized credit card charges your admission via text that you have not been paying your share for months, despite having the money and witnesses to your behavior. I am not arguing anymore. This decision is final." Her final attempt to manipulate me came in the form of reminiscing about our good times and suggesting we could work through this rough patch with counseling. Once this might have swayed me, but I now recognized it as another tactic. I simply repeated that my decision was made and offered to be present when she collected her belongings, if she preferred to have a witness. A week later, Jessica moved out with the help of 2 friends who gave me cold glares based on whatever story she had told them. I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief as I watched them load her possessions into a rental truck. The apartment felt emptier, but somehow lighter without the constant tension of the past months. The aftermath was difficult in ways I had not anticipated. The silence in the apartment was deafening at first. I had grown accustomed to another presence, even an increasingly hostile one, and adjusting to solitude took time. Jessica sent alternating messages of rage and reconciliation for weeks, which I documented but largely ignored. Eventually, her mother called again, this time threatening to report me for theft of Jessica's belongings, though I had meticulously ensured she took everything that was hers. The harassment grew so persistent that I was forced to change my phone number and lock down my social media accounts. Some mutual friends took her side based on her version of events, which hurt deeply, but also revealed who my true friends were. Michael remained steadfast, as did a small circle of others who had witnessed Jessica's behavior firsthand over the months. Financially, I was in a difficult position. Covering both portions of rent for several months had depleted my savings, and I was now solely responsible for an apartment leased for two incomes. I picked up freelance coding projects on weekends to rebuild my financial cushion, and considered finding a roommate or moving to a smaller place when the lease ended. Emotionally, I struggled with feelings of betrayal and self-doubt. How had I missed the signs? Why had I tolerated the behavior for so long? A friend suggested I might benefit from talking to someone professional, which led me to join a support group for people who had experienced financial abuse in relationships. The term had never occurred to me before, but hearing others' similar stories helped me understand what had happened and begin healing. The group taught me about setting boundaries, recognizing red flags, and rebuilding trust in myself and, eventually, in others. I learned that financial abuse often escalates to other forms of control, and that my decision to end things when I did likely spared me greater pain down the road. Most importantly, I learned I was not alone in having been deceived by someone I loved and trusted. Gradually, I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Jessica. Many had sensed something was wrong but did not know how to help or feared I would reject their concerns. Their return to my life brought back joy and perspective I had been missing. I resumed old hobbies like hiking and playing guitar, rediscovering parts of myself that had faded during the relationship. 6 months after the breakup, I had regained my financial footing and emotional stability. I decided to move to a different neighborhood, wanting a fresh start in a place without painful memories. The new apartment was smaller, but entirely mine, decorated according to my taste without compromise or criticism. When I felt ready, I cautiously began dating again. I was transparent about my past experience without dwelling on it, and paid careful attention to how potential partners discussed money and responsibility. I set clear boundaries from the beginning and watched to see if they were respected. Some people found this approach too cautious or formal, but those worth knowing appreciated the honesty and clarity. A year after Jessica, I met someone who showed me what a healthy partnership actually looked like. Amanda was independent, responsible with her finances, and scrupulously fair about shared expenses. More importantly, she communicated openly about expectations and respected the boundaries I set. For the first time, I understood that true love enhances freedom rather than restricting it, supports growth rather than enabling dependence. Looking back now, I can see my experience with Jessica as a painful but valuable lesson. I learned that love without respect is merely attachment, that partnership requires shared values beyond shared interests, and that someone who truly cares for you will not repeatedly put their desires above your well-being. These lessons came at a high cost, but they shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and ultimately happier. I found freedom in understanding that love is not meant to be exploitative but collaborative, not a transaction but a genuine desire for mutual growth and happiness. What about you? Have you ever realized you were giving too much in an unbalanced relationship? Let me know in the comments below, and do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Your experiences might help someone else recognize their own worth and make the difficult but necessary changes in their life. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes walking away is the greatest act of self-love.